So I'm going to read a story from the Bible. It's a story that, I don't know if you've been to church before at Christmas, or maybe you have a tradition of watching carols from Kings. If you want to admit that, that's absolutely fine. You're so welcome if that is you. This is a really famous passage, and I'm going to read it out and share a thought just as we head into this season. So listen in. It's called The Word Became Flesh, from John's Gospel, John chapter 1, verses 1 to 14. It says this: "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." Amen. You ever think about, how do you really know what somebody's like? How can you really know somebody? Earlier this week, I met an amazing two people. It's going to go again. It's going to get lower and lower. I'm just going to ignore. I'm not going to touch it. I met two people that worked in the film industry. They were, I don't know, kind of the techie stuff that people do. And as I got chatting to them, I started to think, oh, I wonder if they know so and so. And it was a particular famous person. And I felt like I just felt like I couldn't say it. I couldn't say, "Excuse me, do you know so-and-so?" But as the conversation went on and they started to warm up, I just said, "Can I just ask you this question? Do you know X?" And they said, "Oh, yeah, we know X." And I thought, because I'm nosy. I'm a vicar. They make us nosy. And I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "What's he really like?" And they said, "Well," looking around. I love when people do that, looking around, make sure no one's listening. They said, "He's a bit of a character." Wow. I've asked that question, like, how do you know what somebody's like? You see, and I said, "Well, why is he a bit of a character?" And they should have said, "Well, you should." They said, you should hear the things that he says." And this was a young woman telling me, you should hear the things that he says. And I thought, gosh, that doesn't surprise me. So how do you know what somebody's like? Well, often when you get to know somebody, you can think you know somebody, particularly if you follow them on social media, or you see them on the television, or you see they're a politician, or there's somebody who's famous. You can have a perception of somebody. And if you follow that person on social media and they put lots of content on, you feel like you can know something about them. But you only really know somebody when you get to hear their words, when you get to hear what they're like when they're not filtered, when it isn't edited, when the lights and the cameras aren't on them, when they're really who they are. You get to hear their words, and of course their words reveal who they are. And of course we know that people's words, if they don't match with in their actions, we question people's integrity. And we live in a time where it seems every person, or there's lots of people we see who are falling from grace. And often we hear that it's that their words that they say don't always match up with who they are or the image that we see. So if you wonder, like, can you really know somebody? This is an amazing passage today. It's if you've ever been in church over Christmas, or you're planning to come to church at Christmas, you're going to hear loads of different stories about Christmas. I don't know, you cast your mind back to the primary school nativities. Oh, things of joy. In my household, my youngest daughter was so sad this week because she didn't have the starring role. She was so upset. Her role is to wear a Christmas jumper in the choir. That is not Mary. That is what she wanted. And often when we go to nativities, if you can cast your mind back, we hear about the Christmas story. We don't always hear, well, why? And so this gospel and this reading particularly answers the question, why? And it poses this question, well, in the same way when I was asking this lady, what's this person really like? It says something about God, and it says something about Jesus, and he says, what's he really like? And in the Bible it says this, that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And you think, well, what on earth does any of that mean? It seems really hard to comprehend. But yet the writer, John, is writing to a people who would understand there are two particular meanings there. And the word that is described here, the word means logos. What on earth does that mean? It means in Greek philosophy at the time was this overriding principle of rational principle called logos or logos. And it's the logos, this Greek word for word, govern the whole cosmos. It's how everything ties together. It was a concept that was very, very prevalent in Greek thought at the time. For a variety of different Greek philosophers, it was an abstract principle, yet it would have been almost the language of the street. This kind of logos, this principle, everything somehow is tied together. And what happens here is the gospel writer John then links it with this Jewish idea. This ancient religious idea that the logos was that which speaks creation, brings creation into being. And he brings these two together. And he says, in the beginning was the Word. And then he presents it and he says, this Word is Jesus Christ. So it's this deeply, profoundly philosophical and religious concept. And then he says the question, what's he really like? What is he really like? And then three simple things that this passage says about Jesus. The first thing, it reveals God's heart. It describes that he was in the beginning. It says there was a man, and he came as a witness. It says John came as a witness of the light. And it says that God is stepping into humanity, that God draws close to us, that God steps in. The context is that Jesus is born to a refugee couple, probably teenagers, into a situation that is less than ideal, into a time of political uncertainty, of political fear. And Jesus steps into that world. And how does Jesus step into that world? As a great orator? As a great person of power? No, we know from the scriptures that he steps in as a tiny baby. Have you ever held a tiny baby? My son was 10 yesterday. He went through all the old photos. I can remember holding him. It's a picture of vulnerability. It's a picture of absolute reliance on people to protect. And this is what the scripture says, that the one who speaks creation into being, the one that knits it all together, doesn't appear with a fanfare of political power, but comes as a baby. The angels appear to who? Shepherds. That is a really bad strategy. Why on earth would you appear to shepherds? They've got no political, social capital. What a waste of time. Who are these people that are thinking this up? Who's the ad organization? Who's the person advising the media people? Makes no sense. But in the economy of God, it makes perfect sense. It says that God's heart is to draw close. Born in the back end of nowhere in Bethlehem, to refugees, announcing to shepherds. It speaks of his heart, the power, the desire to become weak as a baby. So what's he really like? He draws close. Thursday I went to Leeds. Okay, that didn't work. I got back and I had to get home quick and I got a taxi. I chatted to the taxi driver and he says, oh, what have you been doing? I said, I've been to Leeds. He said, oh, what did you go to Leeds for? I said, well, I had to go see someone. He said, well, in Leeds? I said, all right, mate, calm down. I said, I'm a vicar in the Church of England. That's usually a conversation killer, but not for this guy. He was chatty. So we got chatting. He was philosophical. And he says, well, I'm a Muslim. I said, well, I'm a Christian. And he says, I think life is about living the best life you can, and then one day you will be judged on all your good works, and you just got to hope that you've done enough good works to get to heaven. I said, well, Moini's now says, fascinating, because I think in Jesus, it doesn't work like that. I believe in grace. That actually, I don't want God to look at my works because my works aren't great. But in this, we see that God steps into humanity. God steps into the broken places, the lost people. We have to work our way up to him, somehow trying to impress him. But he draws close to us. Second thing is, as he draws close to us, he identifies with our experience. It says in Isaiah that he is a wonderful counselor. I don't know whether life has been such a challenge that you have ever spoken to a counselor. I've done that a number of times. Imagine if you go and see a counselor and they're 16 years old. And you say, you're a bit young to be doing this, aren't you? You say, yeah, I have. And he said, well, tell me a bit about your life. He said, my life has been amazing. I've had no problems in my life. And at the age of 16, I feel I can help you with all your issues. You'd be like, forget it. You want to talk to somebody who's been trained, they know what they're doing, but they've experienced life. Some of the most amazing people that have the greatest empathy are people who have experienced life. And then when you experience it and they open their heart to yours and your heart, you're like, I am so blessed to have this conversation with that person. So why does it matter that he's described as the wonderful counselor? Because this is not a God that you have to work hard to somehow hope he sees you, impresses. It's a God that draws close. And not only is it a God who draws close, it's a God who is familiar with our ways. So what does it mean? It means, have you ever had a broken relationship? Maybe right here, right now, there's a sense, there's a pain in your heart because there's a relational breakthrough or breakdown, or somehow you felt rejected by somebody, or you feel like you've been bullied, or there's a point in the Bible where Jesus is so overwhelmed with anxiety, it says that his capillaries burst. Have you ever experienced that kind of pain in your life? Well, who understands what that is like? One of the greatest things in this time in the mental health crisis is genuinely finding somebody who knows what it's like to experience what is you're experiencing right now. And here is somebody who's not distant but draws close, who's experienced these things. And so when we talk to him, Lydia beautifully described talking to God. We're not talking to somebody who's sat on a cloud, chilling, distant from experience, but somebody who has walked on earth, who is familiar with our ways. So we talk to someone who knows what it's like, who has experienced some of the most profound things: grief, loss, rejection, anxiety. That he's experienced that. And as he identifies with us, we ask that question. So what's he really like then? And it describes in the passage, in verse 14, it says, the Word became flesh, made his dwelling among us. There's one translation of the Bible. It says this: he moves into the neighborhood. Well, if he draws close to us, if he can identify with us, and if he moves into the neighborhood, then what's he really like? What's he really like? A couple of weeks ago, I had the great privilege of going to Uganda, and it was life-changing. And I'd love to tell you all about it, but I don't have time, because you guys need to get to the pub, and these guys need to get back to Newcastle. And that's a steady drive, steady 70 all the way, okay? Jesus is watching. I went with an amazing charity called Tear Fund. And they took us out there, such a privilege, to a number of vicars from around the north of England to go and see how churches can change communities. So I went to Karamoja, a region of northeastern Uganda, to a little place near Katido. Went to this village, and they said, and the guys were like, you just got to brace yourself for this. I've never seen anything like it. We met a girl, she was 10. Her parents had died. She was looking after her 8-year-old brother and her 3-year-old brother. And we said, well, what about other family? Can they not help? And they said, they're on the edge of a famine. They're on the edge of starving. They eat 1 meal a day. They earn 40p a day. And we left that. And the church wasn't in there. There wasn't a project. They were kind of saying, look, this is some of the hardest things in this part of the nation, this part of Uganda. And we left and we got into these 4x4s. And you know when it's just quiet? Because it just feels like, oh, that's heavy. And we're like, well, I've got 3 kids. And we're like, what's going to happen to that girl? And look, she's at risk of sexual exploitation. Those boys statistically are likely to go to Kampala and become street kids. And the street kids there, the way they deal with the starving is that they sniff petrol. It takes away the hunger. And you're just like, this is not how it's meant to be. This is not how it's meant to be. And they said, well, look, we're going to the plan is to plant something there to see significant change and transformation. They said, we're going to take you somewhere where we planted a church and a community was just like that one. And so they took us it was just amazing. It was night and day. And the first thing that they do is deal with a sense of shame and start to read the Bible and speak about Jesus, and people's lives begin to change. You could see starting to grow crops. But the thing that struck me the most was what's it like when God moves into the neighborhood? A man got up and he said, I used to beat my wife. He was a violent man. He said, but I encountered Jesus, my life has changed. He's got a job. He's got dignity and worth. His kids are going to school. He's beginning to see change. You see, when God moves into the neighborhood, there is change. It connects with this idea in the Old Testament. It's really kind of a bit boring, but this idea of the tabernacle. There was a season where God's people were far away from Jerusalem, and the presence of God they were like camping out. And wherever God's presence was, there was change. And there was a sense of his presence. Where there's a sense of his presence, there is the possibility of hope. And when there's this sense of his presence and the possibility of hope, there is always change. And this passage here, the writer John is saying, when Jesus moves into the neighborhood, there is possibility of significant change. When Lydia, you should do this because you made that your story, however it started, your story is not defined by your past. That Jesus can rewrite your story into something beautiful. I saw in Uganda communities, lives being radically transformed. I've seen it in this country, of lives being changed, of people describing stories of how God has almost like Jesus moved in next door, and he moved in next door and he changed everything. So what's he really like? What's he really like? Who do you say he is? And what's he really like for you? I'll ask you 2 questions. Today we heard some incredible stories, didn't we? Absolutely mind-blowing. And I guess the question is, if those guys who are baptized today, if they say that's what Jesus is, that's what he's really like to them, that if he's really like that to them, then what's he really like? And the second question is, if he's really like that to them, then he can be really like that to you. And maybe today, if you're honest, you'd love to see life change, but you don't know how. Or you'd love somebody who can really understand you. Or the idea that God draws close and he loves you. Just that sense, it's just something you think, I'd love to explore that more. We're gonna, as you know, the lights are up. 25 days, folks. Would you join us this Christmas? Would you come? You'd be so welcome. As we journey through these stories and we ask the question, what's he really like? And if you're part of you right now as you're here and you've come out of politeness because your mate's got baptized, but if you're thinking, do you know, these guys are weird, but there might be something in it. Would you come this Christmas? On your chair, you'll find a card, and there's even like a nativity next week, 10 a.m. I know it's 10 a.m., and I know that's too early, but there is bouncy castles, okay? Come on, I'm not going to judge you if you want to go on the bouncy castles. There's loads of stuff. Would you come? And would you come and just think, what's he really like? And we run here in the New Year something called the Alpha Course. Over 30 million people around the world have done it. And it asks this question, well, this says, why Jesus? But who is he? And if it's true, because 5 people tonight said it is, they can change everything. Would you come? And maybe here tonight, you're thinking, I want to know, I can't wait till then. Then come speak to me or to Richard or anyone with a badge. But each of us with these badges has a different story of how we asked that question, so what's he really like? And someone told us. And we asked those questions and encountered him. Each of us has a story, and we'd love to share it with you. Thank you.